wish I'd put on my headphones earlier. I hope he said some nice things about me. Let me get organized here. Can everyone hear me okay? Standing here? Yes? Closer? Maybe we can get some more volume on the mic. It's an honor to be invited to address SOCINE and to think of one's work of being read by one's Southern colleagues. I've been impressed by the warmth of Brazilian hospitality and, of course, the food, one of the most important things to me. I want to thank Gilberto and also Fanal for their kindness and for their dedication and their work to helping me get here. I've been very grateful that they've made my visit so pleasant and comfortable. And thank you all for coming tonight. I would like to, excuse me, I'm not totally prepared here. I'm almost prepared. Sorry, there we go. I'd like to begin with an anecdote. It was a warm summer night in Berlin, and the unthinkable happened. We ran out of beer. The occasion was an informal dinner to introduce Harun Farocki and Antje Eeman to friends who run the gallery Campagne Première. It is a testament to Harun's generosity and grace and to his belief that no significant moment go unrecorded that he allowed me to make a short film on the spot, entitled Harun, Who Only Drinks Beer, Has a Glass of Wine.
Yeah. It's not so heavy as cannibalism. No. You have to take out the cheese. There's not much left. And so the first time I see my husband drinking red wine after like 13 years. No. That is because I'm halfway. And how is it? It's nice.
Harun also believed that history runs in rhythms that are as uneven as they are contingent and unpredictable. How could we know then that he would be lost to us precisely 3 years later on July 30th, 2014? And it's also my time to mention that I take all of my lectures very seriously, but this work has been something that I really had to do for such a close friend as Harun was, to try to bring a deeper appreciation of his work. This sense of history's rhythms, as suspended between reifying and liberating forces, connects Farocki's thought in images to some of critical theory's most compelling concepts. In a still powerful essay on photography, written in 1927, the great German critic Siegfried Kracauer writes of photography and film's potentials for unlocking a liberated consciousness. And indeed, this talk is called Harun Farocki's Liberated Consciousness. A liberated consciousness would understand, express, and make visible the provisional status of all configurations. The phrase that Kracauer uses is freigesetzten Bewusstsein. Idiomatically, freigesetzt means released. Etymologically, the placement of gesetzt in the phrase points towards the concept of law, whether natural or social. From what would the image release consciousness then? Kracauer suggests many possibilities. From the material silence of brute nature and history's claim to a total image of the past, or from the reification of all social relations into capitalism's impenetrable monograms. In any case, the bet that Kracauer makes on photography and film is itself released, like a dice throw, from their potential for reintroducing an image of time and change to the world. The republication in 1963 of Kracauer's essays of the 1920s in a collection called The Mass Ornament, as well as the German translation of his 1960 book, Theory of Film, had a profound impact on the Oberhausen generation in Germany, a loose grouping of post-war filmmakers to which Harun Farocki did and did not belong. I am not asserting any direct influence here, but I do think that one way of characterizing the political commitment, his political commitment, and his restless experimentation with media and form can best be understood in reference to Kracauer's materialist and sensory aesthetics. Indeed, Krakauer conceives of social space as a construction that presents to us ciphers of power whose constitutive forces are given full and imminent visibility, yet remain unrecognized, unacknowledged, or unseen. It takes a liberated consciousness to interpret and criticize these ciphered images by breaking them open, reassembling them, and placing them in unfamiliar contexts. Moving image media are novel instruments for creatively executing these liberatory actions. And in a globally networked world where every individual is potentially a citizen reporter, these powers have been radically augmented. For similar reasons, neoliberal forces seek to edit and filter them. These are strange days for trying to release critical consciousness into our media-soaked environments. Farocki was uniquely yet uncertainly placed in the so-called New German cinema for a number of reasons. This made him something of an extraterritorial figure in ways that may account for the originality of his perspective on form and on history. Farocki was Berlin-based rather than working out of Frankfurt, Hamburg, or Munich. Moreover, the auteur cinema of fiction was never his ambition. His greater commitments were to a restless engagement with political and formal experimentation that owed more to filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, Chris Marker, and Jean-Marie Straub and Daniel Villiers. In a career spanning nearly 50 years, Farocki made more than 100 works, working in whatever genre or format, short or long, that fit his political and creative purposes, including video and gallery or museum installations. For my water. From a very early point in his career, Farocki considered his own artistic configurations to be open and provisional. He restlessly disassembled completed work, disconnecting audiovisual fragments, sounds, and images, and recycling and remixing them into ever-renewable combinations. Before the advent of digital media, and even before video, Farocki worked from the principle that every work was open to further revision and recontextualization. This was not simply an aesthetic strategy. The fact that no seam or connecting link was permanent meant that reification was a dynamic, unstable, and incomplete process. Nothing that was done couldn't be undone and reconfigured. For Farocki, this was as much an ethic and a vision of history as it was a creative commitment. Farocki observed, reported, critiqued, analyzed, and deconstructed, sometimes in his own voice, and other times strategically deploying the voice of others in a free, indirect relation. It is tempting to say that Farocki worked in the genre of the essay film, though this might be too small and vague a category to contain the inventive breadth of his moving image works. Nor can they be considered straightforwardly documentary in any restrictive sense. Each one of his major works, and there are many, emerge as if in search of a new hybridity, where fiction and nonfiction, the imaginary and the real, the invisible and the visible, suppressed and conspicuous forces combine and recombine in always startling combinations. The simplest and truest thing one can say about his work is that he spent a life engaged in the critique of images by and through images. Indeed, he was a master of building arguments from appropriated images and situations, often from surveillance cameras, amateur video, automated drones, aerial photography, computer displays, and so forth, and then weaving them into his own footage to bring forward unseen and unexpected correspondences. Some examples include How to Live in the German Federal Republic, which explores instruction as a means of social control by building its images from training simulations. And I Thought I Was Seeing Convicts, which combines surveillance footage from prison with that of visitors to a shopping mall. Videograms of a Revolution, Farocki and Andrei Ujica's account of the fall of Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu is a tour de force of this genre. Of recombinant video, I guess one could call it. In every one of his works, Farocki asks us to pose again the question, what is an image? Or even better, what is a human image? Moreover, much of his mature work examines in fascinating ways the proliferation of non-human perspectives and spaces in our image environment. And in each case, Farocki asks us to reconsider how every image provokes an intelligence and an ethics of seeing. These concerns are often reflected in his titles. For example, Before Your Eyes, Vietnam from 1982, the German title, Etwas wird sichtbar, literally means something becomes visible or something is visible. Or an image, Ein Bild, from 1983, which documents and critiques all the phases of construction involved in creating the so-called natural beauty of a centerfold model. Perhaps the best way to account for the power and originality of Farocki's liberatory ethics of seeing is to return to three of his best-known works: Inextinguishable Fire from 1968, and an ethical interrogation of Dow Chemical's production of napalm during the Vietnam War, Images of the World and the Inscription of War from 1988, an essay on not seeing or acting on what is perfectly visible, the German death camps recorded by U.S. aerial photography during World War II, and finally, Serious Games, a four-part video installation examining how the U.S. military currently uses technologies of simulation and gaming. And of course, this work, Serious Games, actually premiered in 2010 in the Sao Paulo Biennial. Produced at 20-year intervals, with many equally important works appearing in between, I consider these three projects as representing different phases of Farocki's critical life and images. Throughout his long and varied career, Farocki was attracted to locations where the expression of power, knowledge, takes place without obvious censorship or camouflage. Corporate headquarters, laboratories, factories, archives, military training sites, shopping malls, whose banality and anonymity belies their social force. That these locations were sometimes documented and sometimes recreated in his works does not detract from their expressive force in the context of Farocki's films and videos. Farocki understood the paradox that power is a relational force that is not hidden, yet also not visible. Visibility does not equal intelligibility or understanding. And documenting the sites where napalm was researched and manufactured does not alone unveil the material and ideological structures that sustain the process. These questions are raised in the opening of Inextinguishable Fire, where, in direct address, Farocki asks us, the viewers, how can I make visible what you do not wish to see? And by the same reasoning, Farocki knows that the sight of flesh burned by napalm will only make us close our eyes to the pictures, to the memory of the pictures, and then to the facts that sustain the process of manufactured destruction. Moreover, it is not enough to report on the process. One must also present the structures of belief and self-justification that sustain the process. In a gesture of personal commitment, Farocki ends the sequence by extinguishing a cigarette on his own arm, and doing so in full knowledge that no image can fully encompass or express the destructive capacity of the mass production of napalm. Farocki's creative imagination was often guided by the polyvalent significance of the concept of Verbund, which in German can mean combination, combining things in an ordinary constructive sense, but also refers to corporate cartels as networks of dominance whose interconnecting and mutually reinforcing links are suppressed or hidden. Combination also suggests montage and construction, as well as demontage and deconstruction, but of a special kind where access to truth may be expressed, though in a displaced relation to the untrue. In Farocki's works, montage becomes a practice of dissociation and recombination, where images can be recycled into new works, thus forming ever more elaborate networks of interconnected elements that acquire new meanings in new contexts. Construction can disjoin elements that we're used to thinking of as invariably connected, and also bring back into relation facts that camouflage themselves by suppressing their interdependence. In this manner, inextinguishable fire is organized through a process of repeating, varying, and reconnecting disjunct parts of an absent whole. Perhaps influenced by Brecht Lehrstücke, or learning plays, the film presents what Farocki calls models of understanding, each one incomplete and fragmentary in themselves, yet which together assemble a new picture of capitalism's self-justifications for imperialism and destruction. The film is not documentary, but analytical. We are not shown the actual offices and laboratories of Dow Chemical. What would be the point? But rather, interpretive restagings of corporate cynical reasoning. At the same time, the film transmits to us many facts: that napalm sticks to the flesh and burns at 3,000 degrees Celsius, that Dow's main offices are located in Midland, Michigan, that corporate research relies less on secrecy than on a strategic compartmentalization of knowledge, and so forth. As importantly, the film represents corporate organizational strategies and ideologies as complexly intertwined discourses. There are two repeated camera movements in the second and third sections of the film that track back from a secretary in the Dow offices and then reframe on a window looking into a conference room, the glass doubling the screen. In the first iteration, a manager informs a lead researcher that they have received a large order from the State Department. The researcher replies, "You know, I don't approve of war, but since we started the war in Vietnam, I'll do anything within my power to end it quickly." This section is entitled Sticky Humanism, der angeklebte Humanismus. It binds the ideology of ending war by producing ever more destructive means for executing war to the stages of inventing and producing napalm. The repeated section is called Intensified Division of Labor. The manager speaks to the secretary, repeating and extending the earlier self-justifications, though this time adding that he is not defending the war, but that napalm saves lives. Of course, it can only save lives by destroying many others. He continues, "The State Department has given us millions of dollars for the further development of napalm. Parts of the public, as well as some of our employees, don't understand this. A chemical corporation is like a set of building blocks. We let each worker have one block to work on. Then we put the blocks together to make whatever our clients request. Each employee is given a discrete task, the better to preserve secrecy." This is also a repeated theme from the film's earlier sections, and its ethical ironies are complex. A corporation is an impersonal entity. No individual employee of the corporation need share the ethical stance of the corporate body, but only fulfill his or her isolated functions within it. And if this is not enough, the individual tasks are compartmentalized, the better to withhold the true nature of the whole. Corporations have their own forms of dissociative montage. At the beginning of the section entitled Model 2, a placard states that scientists and researchers feel only like observers of the war because intensified division of labor hides their contributions to the total process. Each section of the film concludes with television news images of napalm use in Vietnam being watched by the fictional scientist. And in each repetition, the characters seem to gain greater awareness of their individual responsibility. Yet this is not a conclusion. And Inextinguishable Fire does not give its viewers an easy resting point, but rather a series of open questions for ethical self-examination. Many destructive products are also useful products. The resignation of one or a few contributors will do nothing to stop the total process. Perhaps all one can do is to follow out systematically the questions, who benefits and who is harmed? Moreover, elements can be reassembled in many different ways and from many different interpretive schemes. In the final section of the film, which you've been watching here, an actor embodies 3 different roles: a worker, a student, and an engineer. Each is a factory employee with different reasons for stealing one component a day in hope of rebuilding a complete image of the disconnected assembly process, something that the whole film is trying to do. The worker is hoping to assemble a complete vacuum cleaner for his wife. The student is hoping to prove that the factory is actually producing submachine guns. But the engineer has a different perspective, where the many parts can be reassembled into a variety of different wholes. A vacuum cleaner can become a weapon, and a submachine gun a useful household gadget. Engineers, workers, students, we are all responsible. Perhaps our most urgent and useful task is to restore the broken links in new ways. I'll let them finish up here. Images of the world and inscriptions of war push Farocki's strategies of dissociative and recombinatory montage to new levels of complexity. The primary theme of the film is to question why the Allies remained willfully blind to the existence of the Nazi death camps despite massive documentation by aerial photography undertaken during American and British bombing raids. Indeed, this unwitting documentation of the camps remained dormant in archives until, inspired by the American television miniseries Holocaust in 1978, 2 CIA analysts working on their own time recovered, analyzed, and labeled significant structures in the archived images. I know it's rather small, but this is one of the images. Within and across this line of inquiry are woven other histories and their representations. Albrecht Meidenbauer's invention of scale measurement photography, the replacement of skilled metal press handwork by mass automation during World War II, Marc Gallanger's collection of identification photographs of unveiled Algerian women, other forms of documentation of the camps, including Alfred Cantor's drawings, Rudolf Verba and Alfred Wetzler's witnessing, and photos taken by SS officers. At first, the links between these stories seem unclear. What does the invention of scale measurement photography or images of unveiled Algerian women have to do with the documentation of the Shoah? These meditations are interrupted then return recursively around other repeating motifs. The Wave Channel Laboratory in Hanover, a makeup session for a Dior model, a life drawing class, an automated drawing machine, the creation of composite photos of faces, a Lufthansa flight simulator, analysts examining surveillance photos, robot car assembly, a computer counting points on a die, a single dice, a remote-controlled video camera traveling through a scale model town. There you are. And various technologies of surveillance and automatic facial recognition, something very far-sighted for 1968. Across this space of recursive disassociation and recombination, composed with all the complexity of a Bach fugue, points of attraction gradually form around key ideas: the replacement of hand and eye by automation and machine vision, witnessing and recording from life at a human scale in tension within the human perspectives of scale measurement at a distance. Automated, I should start that sentence over. make more sense that way. Oops. I lost the appropriate, here we go. Let's try that again. Points of attraction gradually form around key ideas: the replacement of hand and eye by automation and machine vision, witnessing and recording from life at a human scale, in tension with the inhuman perspectives of scale measurement at a distance, automated aerial photography, and electronic surveillance and mapping. These ideas are less directly asserted than implied in the image constellations that emerge across the film's logic of repetition and variation. Nonetheless, I have always felt that there are two intruders that disturb these multiple series. These intruders are the Dior model and the wave channel laboratory. Perhaps the Dior model is there to show how chemistry and techniques of the hand can work in tandem to enhance artfully a face, or to sculpt the eye as a thing to be seen, or as an object of consumerist self-absorption, rather than an active organ of vision. Indeed, one of the minor themes of the film has to do with the variability of the face as masked or unveiled, or as reconstructed and reproduced from image elements. In contrast, the wave machines produce a technological simulation of nature, reproducing nature's forces, wave mechanics, in ways that become available to data recording, quantification, and mathematical modeling. This is how science appropriates the task of presenting to perception and analysis the unseen world that surrounds us and through which we move, an ambient environment or second nature that is taken for granted. Perhaps, too, these images present an allegory of history that is tightly woven into the compositional logic of the film. The films are cycles of forward movement that also return, always different, yet always the same, in a play of forces entirely mediated by technology. The laboratory experiments in wave mechanics thus become fitting bookends for a film whose larger theme is how visual technologies blind us to historical data. More is not always better. The history of non-human vision of automated technologies of image making and data collection by military and state surveillance apparatuses is marked by a peculiar form of tunnel vision,